Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly, and welcome to this weekend special edition. Today, I want to bring you an interview I did this past week with one of former President Donald Trump's sons, Eric Trump, who runs the Trump Organization. It was his first time ever on the show, and in the wake of the second assassination attempt on his father's life, yes, the second, we talked about all the disturbing angles. Where was Eric when he got the news, and how he wound up watching the arrest of the would-be assassin. He also opened up about what it was like for his young children. He's got little ones, and this is their grandpa, when they witnessed the first assassination attempt while actually watching the rally. We are back tomorrow with Vivek Ramaswamy and also Batya Ungar Sargon. Hope you join us. We'll see you then. Eric, welcome to the show. So sorry about what happened to your dad. How's he doing today?
He's doing well. The guy's incredibly strong. I mean, you've known him forever, right? He's a warrior. I spoke to him immediately after it happened. I was one of the first people I knew, and he was in okay spirits. But honestly, I'm almost not, right. I'm sick and tired of seeing people try and take his lives. It's this second time in 5 weeks that this has been allowed to happen. Butler was an utter failure. You've done, I think, a better job, probably, Megyn, than anybody on reporting on that. It should never happened. I mean, what happened there is just it's a breakdown of government in the worst possible ways. And then obviously you see what happened yesterday, and yesterday was ultimately a success, right? They got the guy ahead of time. They found out where he was, and they saved somebody from utter catastrophe. But this has to stop. This has to stop. We can't allow people with AR-15s, with AK-47s within 300 yards of the president. It has to stop. We have to do a better job. There's only so many kind of proverbial lives that you have before. Guess what? You don't get so lucky. He got incredibly lucky, and Faith was definitely with him, 5 weeks ago. But it's only so many times you get lucky, and this isn't funny anymore. I mean, and I just want everybody to understand they are trying to kill him, Megyn. They are trying to kill him, and it's one of the things that drives me crazy when you see Kamala on the debate stage. This man's a threat to democracy. It's there's only one person that they're going after, and they're going after him viciously, and they've gone after him in every single way. They've gone after him legally. They tried to impeach him. They tried to take him off the ballot in states. They tried to take him off the ballot in Colorado and Maine. They've gone after his family. They've gone after all of us thousands of times. Megyn, I'm probably the most subpoenaed person in the history of the country, and I've never done a damn thing wrong. They've done everything they could. They've weaponized, the judicial system, DAs, AGs. They've gone after him civilly. And now twice in 5 weeks, as we approach 50 days, away from Election Day, they've tried to kill him. And they will stop at absolutely nothing. They are trying to kill him, Megyn, and it's deeply scary. And we government better do a good job protecting him. And sometimes I worry that they're not.
Yeah, I'm understandably, and for good reason. May I ask, how did you find out the news yesterday?
Yeah, I had a dear friend who was actually in the sheriff's department who ended up calling me because obviously it went across the radio. So as soon as shots were fired, he called me saying, "Hey, you might want to figure out what the hell's going on. It looks like they just tried this for a second time." And so obviously I got on the phone, and they were taking him off the course, and that's how I found out. But it's coincidentally I was driving south on 95. I actually took a personal video of the guy being arrested at the time. I mean, it's interesting how small the world can be at times. But I'm driving south on 95. The police chase was going north on 95, and literally I drive by all the helicopters and all the squad cars that are arresting the very man that 15 minutes before tried to shoot my father. It's interesting how the world works, but it's thank God they got him, and now apparently he's in federal court laughing in front of the judge. So that's the type of person that we're dealing with.
The reaction from the left last night, at least on the media, has been there was an incident. That's what NBC reported. There was an incident at Trump's golf course, and oh, by the way, let's get back to cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio, and Trump's irresponsible rhetoric. Did you see any of that in your reaction?
Yeah, that's part of the course for the media. I mean, we've obviously found out based on this whistleblower came forward with a signed affidavit that ABC gave the questions to Kamala Harris. I'd like to know where Bob Iger is on this whole thing. I mean, you want to talk about disgusting, and that's part of the course for the media. They may as well be, the PR arm of the Democratic Party. 100% of their coverage toward her is positive, despite the fact that she's the worst vice president in the history of this country, bar none. It's not even close. And despite the record my father had, they're 100% negative against him. And it's an absolute joke. Of course they wanted, and you see all these reports in the vicinity. Shots were fired in the vicinity. All right, let me just break this down because I know this property better than any person on earth, maybe other than my father. I run these properties. You had a person who ran across a median, who ran across a massive lawn into a massive palmetto bushes, effectively, was staged up against a fence 200 yards away from where my father was. He was on the fifth green. He was about to come down the sixth hole. This guy was in the middle of the sixth hole with body armor, GoPros, and a AK-47 on a fence line. Thank God the Secret Service saw him. And then it's, yes, a shooting in the vicinity of the president. I mean, they use every word that they possibly can to dumb down what this person was trying to do, which was to kill the 45th president of the United States, to extinguish him from this earth. But that's part of the course. They don't want that story out there, right? They don't want this headline. They want to do everything they can to bolster Kamala's, campaign, which is not much of a campaign because, again, she's just a horrible candidate. But, there was a meme going around, Megyn, that the Will Smith slap literally lasted longer than the coverage of Butler, Pennsylvania. And I think that's fairly accurate. And that's the media in this country today.
Mm-hmm. The thing that struck me yesterday was your dad has a few pastimes. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. So what does he do to burn off stress? And there must be a lot of it on him. He plays golf, which is a good thing to do. And now even that has been hampered by this would-be assassin. I mean, now your dad's not going to be the same when he gets out. He's going to have to worry about whether somebody's trying to take his life. Is that, in your view, a Secret Service failure, an intelligence failure, a rhetoric failure by people who say he's Hitler? What do you think? What are you blaming today?
It's a question that pains me to answer. And there's really two sides of it, Megyn. The agents, and I know them. I know all the ones that were on the stage in Butler, Pennsylvania, and they did an awesome job. The ones on that stage did an awesome job. I mean, they would take a bullet for him. And there were ones on that stage who were with me for 3 years. I know them personally. They're personal friends of mine, right? There were people that were out there with him yesterday, and they did a phenomenal job. They got him off that course so quickly. I mean, as the first shot went out, they were pulling him off, and they did a hell of a job. But somebody's got to ask the question, what the hell's happening in the perimeter? I mean, what's happening in the perimeter? I mean, frankly, if I was an agent, I'd be screaming from the rooftops, right? You're putting great agents who are doing phenomenal jobs and have acted perfectly in that situation, but yet something is failing on the outskirts where you've had somebody with a rifle in Butler, Pennsylvania, 130 yards, somebody died and he got hit in the ear. In this case, 200 to 300 yards away with an AK-47 propped up against a fence line. There's only so much that body people can do. And clearly somebody on the outskirts is failing this mission because that should not happen. And, I hope to God somebody does a deep dive. And it hurts me to say that because, again, the people who are around him are some of the greatest, finest people you'll ever meet in your entire life. I know them. I'm friends with them. I've known them for years. And they would take a bullet and they, would die for him. And many of them, based on the incompetence, frankly, Megyn, have almost. I mean, they're in the line of fire. In Butler, there's multiple shots that went at. Any single one of them could have gotten killed. What is going on with the perimeter that's supposed to be around our world leaders? How can this possibly happen? 130 yards is a chip shot. I did a lot of competitive shooting. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do. I mean, that's like making a 4-inch putt. 300 yards with a modern day rifle. This is not ask any person who hunts deer, ask any person who's an outdoorsman, 300 yards with a modern day rifle. These are not hard shots. And yet it's happened, twice in the last 5 weeks? We better rethink our tactics. And on every side, every person who is a political protectee in this country, we better rethink our tactics because whatever the hell we're doing right now, Megyn, is not working. It's not working. And there's not going to be too many more chances before somebody gets awfully lucky because these aren't hard shots.
One word on that ABC affidavit to which you referred. We're actually going to take a deep dive into that later in the show. ABC hasn't responded to our requests on whether they want to deny any of these allegations, nor has Speaker Johnson hasn't weighed in. Allegedly, he got the letter from this whistleblower. But we are going to take a deep dive into whether, in fact, there's reason to believe they cheated on that debate, that they gave Kamala Harris, explicitly unfair advantages, sample questions, and so on, just so the audience knows. Can I ask you this? Because right now, in the wake of the second attempt on your dad's life, we have President Biden, Vice President Harris saying the right things about, no one should be subjected to political violence, and, this is wrong. And yet there seemed to be absolutely no accountability, nor was there any shift in tone from Kamala Harris, who's now the nominee. after the first assassination attempt. I mean, the rhetoric has been at a boiling point consistently from their side, not just about politics and who should run the country, but about how evil your dad is. So do you accept their statements today that they're very sorry about what happened and that really this should never happen?
No, I don't accept their statements, Megyn, and not at all. I mean, before Butler, Pennsylvania, 2 days before, Biden had a truth or an X up saying that we should put the president in the quote unquote crosshairs. I mean, you've done a better job than anybody going back. I mean, look at Maxine Waters' comments. Look at it, right? You kick them when they're down. You kick them again. You hit them hard. You hit them when they're down. I mean, they are the most violent people in the world. The bullets are only going one way here, right? When was the last time that? And it's insane. They've called for violence so many times. So no, I don't believe the rhetoric at all. This is the same administration that wouldn't give RFK Secret Service protection, despite the fact that multiple people in his family, not despite the fact that he's a serious political candidate for a major party in the country, but also despite the fact that several people in his family have been executed, right? I mean, they've been taken out by assassins. They refused to give the guy, and my father was the guy who came out and said, give this guy Secret Service protection. You're going to get this man killed. I don't think they give it to him, Megyn, honestly, and it pains me to say that. And so, yeah, you see some post online that doesn't feel genuine at all, that's written by some staffer saying the absolute bare minimum of what should be said. And there was no accountability. I mean, why didn't Biden get rid of the Secret Service director? Why did she have to resign on her own after she gets up there and says the reason that they didn't have snipers on the roof in Butler, Pennsylvania is because the slope of the roof was too steep, right? Everybody knew that was BS. Everybody knew that was total nonsense. It was the least steep roof of all of them. In fact, the roofs that the snipers were on were exponentially more steep than the roof that the would-be assassin tried to shoot my father from. Yet, this is the narrative, right? And there's no accountability. I mean, if I was Biden, I would have forced a resignation 5 minutes after this. I mean, isn't that what happens when protectees start getting shot at when you have such big lapses? But they never hold anybody accountable. They didn't hold Milley accountable when you had the most disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, right? I mean, why is it that this administration holds no one accountable for failure after failure? I mean, what's that going to do? That's just going to incentivize further failure. That's never going to get you to a good result. People should know that they have responsibility, and they better take that responsibility seriously. Otherwise, they're not going to be there the next day. That's how the real world works, but that's not how it works under these guys. And so, no, I think it's a lot of lip service. I think the tweets were incredibly generic. They were nonsense. I guarantee you they probably never even saw them. They were probably written by some low-level staffer who put it out because they realized that they had to say something. But I think it's completely disingenuous, especially, again, given that Biden has been the first person to say he hopes Donald Trump remains in the quote-unquote crosshairs, which, unfortunately, he's been twice in the last 5 weeks.
Exactly right. The weirdness of this would-be shooter's book, talking about Iran. I'm going to quote more now from this book, which is available on Amazon. I would like to celebrate the amazing work of John Kerry that very humbly and humanly handled the Iran deal, which elated me and the whole of the world. I must take part of the blame for the retarded child, quoting here, that we elected for our next president that ended up being brainless. But I am man enough to say that I misjudged and made a terrible mistake. And Iran, I apologize. And here's where he says what we said in the intro. You are free to assassinate Trump as well as me for that error in judgment and the dismantling of the deal. No one here in the U.S. seems to have the balls to put natural selection to work or even unnatural selection. There is an Iranian death threat on your dad. They've been investigated, and there was a warning that the Secret Service was aware of before Butler, though the complaints by the locals was that was not shared with them. Do you have any concerns about whether this guy might have some ties to Iran or some foreign actor overseas?
Yes. I mean, listen, we've had the Iranian death threat on all of us, frankly, for a very long time. It's something that we've been very cognizant of for many years, frankly. I mean, from the time that he was in office, and he was taking out guys like Soleimani and al-Baghdadi and, so many of their nuclear scientists and doing so many other things. I mean, it's interesting that the guy, the would-be shooter yesterday, was complimenting a country that literally chants death to America. I mean, in Tehran, they chant death to America on their streets, yet he's complimenting how great their nation is. It's also kind of ironic that, we had total peace in the Middle East under my father, right? Iran was broke. We were exporting oil from the U.S., meaning we didn't need their oil. My father put massive embargoes on them. Effectively, anybody who buys Iranian oil, we're not going to buy a single product. I mean, the United States of America will not buy a single product from. So you want to trade oil with them? Congratulations. You're effectively cut off from every market around the world. Iran was broke. There were no missiles flying. They weren't attacking our greatest ally in the Middle East, right, which is obviously Israel. There was total peace, no problems from the Taliban, no problems from ISIS. Taliban, right, for the last 18 months, we didn't lose a single service member over in Afghanistan. My father sent the head of the Taliban literally a picture of his home. And, hey, guess what? Don't mess with the United States. You know what's going to happen if you do. Right, there was peace in the Middle East. You had the Abraham Accords. You had the moving of the embassy, as everybody knows very well. You had the Golan Heights. You had so many great milestones in the Middle East. And, it's amazing that the shooter, it's the same guy that's laughing in front of a courthouse right now as he's, facing probably the rest of his life in jail for doing what he, inevitably wanted to do. But, it's amazing that this person is a guy who's, complimenting a country that, again, wants our total demise, wants to create nuclear weapons to use against the West, to extinguish our religion, our way of life, our families, and everything that red, white, and blue stands for. And so it's very par for the course for the guy that I see in that picture who looks like a total maniac.
There is a retired FBI assistant director. He was in office from 2004 to 2006. His name is Chris Swecker. Was 24 years with the FBI. Helped actually capture Eric Rudolph after the Olympic Park bombing, the actual guy who did it. And in a Newsweek interview, he said the biggest question to answer here is, how did the would-be assassin know to be at that location at that time? And then he goes on to say, Eric, there are only three possible answers. He guessed and got very lucky. He conducted surveillance on Trump and followed him to the golf course, or he had inside information about Trump's schedule. Your thoughts on those three possibilities?
I agree with him 100%. And at what world do we think it's a good idea for somebody with a pistol to be fighting a guy with a rifle, right? Those odds, this is never good, never good. Pistols versus rifles don't work out well, in the modern day. We better get a real perimeter around the president, and we better do so quickly. Megyn, they're trying to kill him, right? They're trying to kill him. I said it, and it was very controversial when I did, and I'm not a tinfoil hat wearing guy. I'm a very pragmatic guy. I've just seen what they tried to do to my family for the last, 10 years now of being us, of us, being in this game. I've seen every single trick. They laughed at us first. Then they tried to take him down. Then they tried to impeach him. Then they went after him. They tried to do everything. And the only thing that was left for them to do was to literally kill him. And a couple months before Butler, I literally said, it would not surprise me at all. These people will stop at absolutely nothing. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And then you take that with real lapses in security. And I'm not talking about even yesterday. I think yesterday, in many ways, was a success. They got the guy before he could do something bad. But we better work on this perimeter because this is getting far too close. Butler was a disaster. And even when Blumenthal, it was probably the biggest anti-Trumper in the world, right? When he comes out and says that there's a lot there to unpack, we better start getting serious because, Megyn, we'd look like a third world country. We probably already do, to tell you the truth, but we'd look like a third world country if if the leading candidate, former president of the United States and leading candidate, likely the 47th president of the United States, gets executed in Palm Beach, Florida. We'd be the laughingstock of the entire world. Congratulations. We're no longer the superpower of the world because people would be laughing at us. Not to mention what would probably be the ramifications that came out of something like that. Civil wars in countries have started for less than things like that. I couldn't even fathom what that would mean for our nation, what that would mean for the American dream, what that would mean for our prosperity, the respect or lack thereof. You can't spend $3 billion on an agency to protect effectively two people, really protect two people. And have gaps. And there were gaps in Butler. There's no question about it. And honestly, it just feels to me
same gap, right? Perimeter in Butler, perimeter down here. As somebody who knows this golf course, you tell me, is it possible, do you think, for somebody to have just followed your dad, just sort of stumbled upon his schedule, like looked for him and then followed him to the golf course?
Yeah, it's awfully easy to see a big motorcade pulling in there, right? But clearly it was premeditated. There's no question about that. I mean, the guy effectively went into a bunch of Eureka Palms, posted along.
How would he know your dad would be there on this particular Sunday, right? Your dad's, apparently it wasn't broadcast. So, I mean, do you have any, because, there are a lot of people thinking this had to be an inside job. And I know we have to entertain that. We have to look down that lane. But is it plausible that he just, yeah, go ahead.
Everybody had better entertain it. Everybody had better entertain everything. Yeah, right. I never thought I'd say this again. I'm not that tinfoil hat guy. I'm actually a very sane human being. And I think there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that are absolutely insane. You better believe after, twice in 5 weeks, you better start entertaining all of those scenarios, because something is very, very wrong, and it could have been very, very different. The guy literally brought a rifle across. Megyn, if you look at that, right, you've got a massive street that's wide open. You've got probably 20 yards of beautiful, perfectly manicured grass. Then you get to a row of beautiful palm trees, right, royal palm trees, and you have about another 20 yards of grass, and then you've got a big hedge line. Inside the hedge line, you have a chain link fence right on the other side of that. He literally got across all of that holding a long gun, and no one saw this, right? There weren't eyes on the street. It's not like he's creeping through a bunch of woods to try and get in a concealed spot in total camouflage. I mean, he literally went across a massive highway in the middle of the day with a long gun, something that you can't just throw in a backpack, right? And slither his way into the bushes, adjacent to a golf hole that my father happened to be on at that time. Yeah, you better entertain those possibilities, because that's seriously bad. And the guy, from looking at him, looks like a total nut job. Obviously, he's crazy. You see that picture, but what happens if he wasn't? What happens if that guy was well camoed? What happens if that agent just didn't happen to be there at the right time? What happens if that guy killed that agent and then used a scope rifle to take somebody out from not a far distance? We better really start locking down this perimeter, because something is awfully wrong. And as I said 3 times on this interview now, they are trying to get him.
Do you feel comfortable
6 months ago, I believed in my heart that they would stop at nothing. But now the world knows they are trying to get him.
Do you feel comfortable having the FBI conduct this investigation? Ron DeSantis is saying he will conduct an investigation of his own down in Florida, just to make sure. There are a lot of people who don't trust the FBI. A lot of people at this point have questions about the Secret Service. Who would you like to see investigate this?
Yeah. It pains me to answer this question, because honestly, I'm the biggest law enforcement guy. I mean, my best friends in the world are all law enforcement. I mean, it's literally Megyn, my closest friends in the world. I've told you stories about them, including yesterday, but they are some of my closest friends in the world. But then I see the weaponization of government. I mean, I was the guy that got the call from the FBI that, about the servers in the basement of Trump Tower communicating with the Kremlin, right? We disproved that in 12 hours, right? First of all, we didn't have servers in a basement, because guess what? Basements flood, right? You don't put servers in basements. It's stupid. Second of all, we're largely cloud computing. So, the notion of really having servers that are communicating with the Kremlin it's insane. We had disproved that, yet that hung over the first 3 years of my father's presidency, right? They could have shut that down second one, day one, and they let that drag and they let that linger. It put 2 superpowers against each other, if you think about it, right? The 2 superpowers with the most nuclear weapons on Earth, Russia and America, for a 3-year period of time, almost couldn't have communications because of the sham hoax that was happening, when an agency knew that it was nonsense, that it was garbage, that there was nothing there. They let it hang over my father. And so, do I have full trust in the FBI? No, I don't. I've seen more leaks through that agency. I've seen more things about us get leaked that were just untrue. I don't. Unfortunately, I don't have faith. And it's so sad, because I have a bunch of friends who are FBI, who are agents, like, the actual gun carriers in that organization. And these are the most incredible people you've ever seen. I mean, a couple of my closest friends in the world are in that agency, and they also shake their heads, saying, what the hell is going on? I mean, it's really amazing how, one floor in one office building and in Washington, D.C. can corrupt an entire agency. And you see that with the Secret Service as well sometimes. I mean, some of the finest people you have ever met in your life, people who, regardless of whether we win on November 5th, will be some of my closest lifelong friends, were people who, frankly, were assigned to Laura and I for a 4-year period of time or a 3-year period of time, depending on when their ship came in. These are some of the greatest people. They love this country. They love America. They would do anything. And they would take a bullet for either my father, they would take a bullet for Biden, they would take a bullet for Harris, they would take a bullet for anybody, because that's their job, and they're brave as hell, and they're good at what they do. But there's also a breakdown at the very top. And make no mistake, some of these agencies are weaponized. I mean, the 8th floor of the Secret Service in Washington, D.C. allowed agents during my father's presidency to go find the 4473, the firearm forms from Hunter Biden. They allowed agents to go over to the firearms store where he had his revolver, and they wanted to collect those forms. I wonder what they were doing. This was while my father was president. Do you think while Joe Biden was president, if Laura Trump threw a revolver in a trash can outside of the supermarket, do you think Secret Service agents would be going over there and trying to fish it out of a dumpster, or going over to the gun store to try and collect the paperwork? Of course they weren't, Megyn. There's corruption in the government. There's massive corruption in the government. That corruption only goes one way, right? I mean, the Democrats have done everything they can to weaponize every single system. They've weaponized the military. They've weaponized the DOJ. They've weaponized the entire legal system. I mean, they're sending the number 3 person in charge of the DOJ to New York to prosecute my father, to try and take him off the ticket so that Joe Biden had a better chance of winning. And everybody knows the end story of what happened there. It's insane. They've weaponized these institutions top to bottom. I mean, they've weaponized healthcare.
And at the center of it is a real life human who has a family, has grandkids. That was one of the first things I thought about. Like, you've got 2 young kids. What are they, like 7 and 5 now? How do you explain to your little ones
and by the way,
that people are trying to kill grandpa?
My kids were sitting on my lap when Butler happened. I was literally typing an email. They were sitting on my lap watching him, right? Everybody was speculating that he was going to make the Vance announcement that day. I knew he wasn't going to, but everybody was watching that rally. It was being telecast by everybody. My kids were 6 and 4 at the time, but I had a 6 and 4-year-old sitting on my lap watching their grandfather, go down with blood flowing across his face. Yeah, he's a real life human being, and it is a real life family. But beyond all of that, I mean, don't cry for us. We're big boys. We can stand on the stage and have so, and I will to the day I die. And I don't care what they do to us. They're not gonna, But this is the guy who does not need to be doing this, right? I mean,
right.
Barack Obama was a community organizer, right? What was his next step? Well, probably politics. My father could live the greatest life in the world. He could stay in Mar-a-Lago. He could have the greatest time. We've got the best assets, the best hotels, the best golf courses around the world. He could live the greatest life and no nonsense. He's not getting shot at every single day, literally and figuratively. He's not sitting in courthouses all around the country. He lives a beautiful life. He could still be the kingmaker of the Republican Party. And guess what he wants to do? He wants to go out and fix this country because we are a failing nation. We are failing on every single front. Our economy is a joke. Countries around the world are laughing at us. I just came back from the Middle East, so we have a project over there. They're literally laughing at us. They're laughing at Biden. I mean, the guy's sleeping on a beach while my father lays wreaths at Abbey Gate, commemorating 13 fallen soldiers in Afghanistan based on the worst withdrawal in the history of our nation. And what, our president is sleeping on a beach getting a suntan? I mean, the world is laughing at us. It's crazy. You have Kamala Harris, who doesn't have a single policy that makes any sense whatsoever. I mean, her economic policies would bankrupt this country in about 2.5 seconds. She's put in charge of the border. We've had 20 million people come across our border. We have 300,000 kids that have died of fentanyl poisoning, and they laugh about it. They haven't done a damn thing. And then she comes out, yes, I'm going to be very serious about the border. Very serious about the border. Megyn, they flew in 320,000 people on aircraft, 737s, into airports all across our nation in the middle of the night. Yet she's saying she's going to be serious about enforcing our border, right? They let in 20 million people into this country. They sold an entire wall that my father had built, right? He put up 500 miles, almost 600 miles. All the rest of the border wall was built. They sold all that steel for scrap at like 4 cents on the dollar, right? And yet they come out and say, yes, we're going to be very serious about closing our border. These people are the biggest crooks. They're the biggest liars. They're so disingenuous. And we would win this election by 100% if they didn't cheat and if they didn't have the entire mainstream media being effectively the propaganda wing of the Democratic Party.
That's right. The media, I mean, we're going to get to that with our next guest. I don't want to waste too much of your time because I know you got to run. Can I just bring this one thing up before I let you go?
Yes.
The New York Times now reporting, this just hit. The federal criminal complaint filed against the suspected gunman says his cell phone was in the vicinity of the area along the tree line of the Trump golf course beginning at 1:59 a.m., which would have been 12 hours prior to the Secret Service finding him, meaning it appears he was likely lying in wait potentially for 12 hours. At a minimum, he visited the site at 2 in the morning and then went back. But this certainly suggests he could have been lying in wait and certainly was outside of the golf course. Yet another thing, if the Secret Service had drones, if the Secret Service, understanding he was going to golf there, would have detected or should have detected in advance, I can't help but feel like he was a sitting duck.
Megyn, he was a sitting duck. I know the exact spot he was in. I know it so well. God forbid that agent wouldn't have seen him. He would have been right in front of him. He would have been 40 yards on the next hole, right there, right where it says hole 6, right where your little arrow is pointing, right? It's just in from that. He would have been standing right there, and the guy would have been there with an assault rifle at 50 yards. Thank God for that agent doing their job. But somebody better take perimeter security more seriously. This is not going to end well. Nothing about this is going to end well. The fact that it's that premeditated, the guy was there 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, that's seriously problematic. What the hell is a person doing there at 1 o'clock in the morning? This is, Megyn, I can't even tell you how I truly feel about this, because it's not only is it devastating for, as a family member, right? I mean, this bothers me more that this is against him than it would be if it were against me, right? I'd be substantially less, upset, but like, we've got to be better than this as a country on every front. On every front, we have to be better than this as a country.
And there should be universal outrage, but there isn't. There isn't. You've seen some of the nasty reaction from leftists online celebrating it. They have absolutely no sympathy for him. You see the snarky comments after Butler, like they're sorry he missed.
Bob Iger, who's the head of ABC, he's the head of Disney, but obviously the parent company, to ABC. I mean, where's the outrage? Where's the outrage against Bob Iger? I mean, if I was Bob Iger, I'd fire everybody at ABC News. I'd fire everybody. I mean, you just tanked the entire brand for ABC News. Where is the outrage? I mean, this is a guy who runs a publicly run company, right? I mean, Disney is he's got a fiduciary duty to his shareholders. His shareholders are hundreds of thousands of people around this country, maybe millions of people around this country and around the world. Yet there's no ramification, right? And they, no different than an organization is willing to literally give the questions of a presidential debate to one of the candidates that they favor. Does it come as any surprise that they want to bury the second time my father has almost been assassinated in a 5-week period of time? That shouldn't shock anybody. Everybody knows whose team they're on. George Stephanopoulos, I mean, he was part of the war room. He was part of the Clinton political team with James Carville and all these people. Does anybody really believe that these people can be fair and objective? Of course they can't be. But also, Megyn, where's the shareholder outrage? If I was a shareholder of Disney, and thank God I'm not, because honestly, they're a failing company at this point, but where is the outrage? Don't these people demand more?
Yeah, apparently not.
I mean, the answer is yes. It's a hypothetical question, but I mean, the fact that Bob Iger has not said a word about either what's happened then and they continue the narrative today, not to mention the NBCs and frankly the CNNs and everybody else on that hit list, it's horribly disgusting. We need answers.
Yeah, they're not acknowledging the multiple failures at the debate. They're not reversing any of their fake fact checks, which is just a disgrace. They're being celebrated for these fake fact checks by other members of the media. And then on top of that, you get this self-proclaimed whistleblower saying ABC gave her sample questions. ABC agreed with the Harris campaign. Again, not yet responded to by ABC or by Speaker Johnson, who was allegedly copied on the whistleblower letter. But not only that they gave her sample questions, but they agreed that they wouldn't ask her about Joe Biden's mental fitness, that they wouldn't ask her about her brother-in-law and his term in the Department of Justice, where he was accused of intentionally giving out big settlements to left-wing plaintiffs in order to curry favor, or her time as California AG. This guy certified mailed this verified, meaning sworn under the penalty of perjury, affidavit the day before the debate. The day before. We haven't seen it. This needs to play out. But why has there not even been an on-the-record denial? This was everywhere yesterday, and it compounds what we saw at the debate, which we know with our own eyes, irrespective of whistleblower, was a negligent attempt at journalism.
Irrespective of the whistleblower, you just took the words out of my mouth. I looked at Susie Wiles, who runs the campaign for us, and she was sitting right next to me during that debate. I was about 30 feet away from my father, just in the room right next door, and Susie and I were watching, and I go, she has the questions. You can just tell the way she was answering them. Bang, 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 bang. I mean, it's almost like, you must have rehearsed them. You know when somebody's scripted. You know when somebody's rehearsed. She was rehearsed. She had seen these questions before. There's just no question about it. And by the way, to your first part of the question is, those would have been the first questions that any logical person would have, any fair, impartial person would have asked. Your own state of California has gone to hell, right? You have homeless camps all over the place. You've got fentanyl crisis, the likes of which you've never seen. People can't afford to live there. It's been the largest migration of people out of a state in the history of the United States by far. It's not even close. Everybody's leaving. Your streets are dirty. Crime is all over the place. You can't walk a block in San Francisco without walking across a hypodermic needle. Like, why should people trust you to run the United States of America, which is much bigger than just the city of San Francisco? I mean, that's like the most obvious question. My 7-year-old son would have thought of that question. And
Biden's mental acuity?
Of course. For the last 3.5 years, you've been saying that the guy was incredibly sharp. He's the modern day, Winston Churchill. He was incredible. He's incredibly vibrant. And then he comes on stage and the entire world sees that he was none of those things. So you effectively lied to the American people for 3.5 years. You did so with fracking. You did so on the border. You did so on a host of other issues. What's your retort? Mrs. potentially, President of the United States. These would be the most obvious questions to answer. Of course, they're not going to do that because they're in bed with her campaign. They're in bed with them.
Well, then you saw the local.
I mean, just go back to him.
The local ABC anchor who questioned Kamala Harris over the weekend in an interview and brings up the topic of guns, not by saying you're on camera supporting a mandatory gun buyback program, by saying, share your values on guns. Just talk about guns in general. And when she totally denies that she wants to take anybody's guns, there's no follow-up, Eric. It's just the journalistic malfeasance is ubiquitous.
Megyn, how about the fact that her vice presidential candidate said that, he lied. He obviously ran on a platform putting tampons in males' bathrooms in Minnesota. I mean, how about the fact that he comes out and says, we're very serious about border security, yet he's the guy that said that if Donald Trump builds a 25-foot tall wall, he's going to build a ladder factory in Mexico to build 30-foot ladders so everybody can come across that wall that Donald Trump just built. I mean, they don't call them on any of this stuff. I mean, this is insanity to the American people. These aren't far-right issues. This is insanity. I guarantee you, if you poll tampons in boys' bathrooms, high school bathrooms, and you poll that across the country, 99% of people would just say this is insane. This is ridiculous.
That's right.
Of course,
that's why they have to deny it.
It's
Eric, I want to tell you, this is just in. We now have body camera footage of the arrest of this suspect, Ryan Ruth. We'll show it to you now. Here it is.
Driver, take 2 steps to your right. Take 2 steps to your right. Driver, walk straight back. Keep walking! Keep that long.
And that's it. FYI, more information coming in about how long he was at the golf course beginning at 1:59 a.m. According to the police affidavit in support of the arrest, he was there. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah, it looks like his cell phone was there from 1:59 a.m. to 1:31 p.m. It looks like they are suggesting at least his cell phone and possibly he were there. The two of them together were there for 12 hours, and there you can see the police doing exactly what they ought to do. So far, he's been charged with possession of a firearm by a prohibited person, a convicted felon, and possession of a firearm with an obliterated serial number. The scary thing here is if those charges don't get amped up, this guy could potentially see daylight again. I don't know. But it just underscores the level of danger your dad was facing yesterday. I'll give you the last word. I know you got to run. Thanks for giving us so much time.
Well, those charges are insane, right? I mean, people are charged with the unlawful possession of firearm all the time, right? And okay, fine. The guy didn't have a serial number on his gun. I mean, the guy wanted to assassinate a person who is beloved by hundreds of millions of Americans, a guy who is a great commander-in-chief of this nation, a guy who's probably the most iconic person, one of the biggest brands anywhere in the world. It was premeditated. He was there in the morning, as you just said, likely there for 12 hours. And you get charged with unlawful possession of a firearm. Megyn, come on, that will flush its way out. I'm sure there'll be federal charges and other things, but I would have thought that those charges would have been a hell of a lot more significant than that. And believe me, if they had been the way around, you better believe that they would have been more significant than that, and hopefully more will come.
Thank you for all your time. All the best to your family, to your dad, your kids. We really appreciate it. Stay well.
Great job with the show. We'll see you soon.